Hello, welcome. Episode 5 of the LuxFit ELIXIR. I'm still Pat Savage. I may look slightly different, but here's the thing. You know how they say that sometimes when people gain infinite knowledge, I think I recorded episode 4 like 20 minutes ago. But what happened was I went on this noble quest to gain infinite wisdom. And on that quest, there was just so much to learn. But here I am. Boom. Beard. Here's what I learned. Now, of course, learning infinite things means I can't sit here and talk about it. I mean, omnipotence is kind of a big deal. But let's just go over a few things that are pretty common. I learned that bananas are a really crucial part of your diet if you want to have long-term health and wellness, and they give you diabetes. Another couple crazy facts I found were that a bowl of Cheerios is vital for heart health, and it gives you a terrible blood panel that leads to a really unhealthy heart. I'll just give you a couple more interesting ones, then we'll move on to the main topic today. I found that running long distance on a regular basis is really good for getting nice, strong lungs. And it messes up your joints so badly that you're stuck on the couch and it makes your lungs really unhealthy. This episode is titled Humans as Art. And most of the upcoming words that I'm going to say are talking about looking at the human body in a little bit of a different way than most of the internet is today. But I do want to say that at the very end, I am going to bring it full circle and get into some details about some mechanical principles that I found to be sort of across the board extremely important for pretty much every single human being. And those four are ankle mobility, anterior pelvic tilt, winging shoulder blades, and rotation of the forearm and wrist. A couple of those you might be like, oh yeah, I've heard those. And I've studied them, or, oh yeah, I've had those. And maybe a couple of them, you're like, maybe that's familiar. But like I said, before I just dole out all that information, I want to go over a few important pieces for kind of like context and lead in. Let's go to like a kind of like a huge light bulb moment for me, which was a disagreement that I was having. A massive argument. And the content does not matter at all, but there was a point where I said something along the lines of, hey, I don't really get why this person, this major figure, is not getting any credit for saying something that turned out to be true, that they had said a few years prior. And so nonchalantly, she replied by saying, well, sometimes if somebody that you don't trust says something, even if it's true, you're not going to believe it. And I was like, like, holy shit, that makes so much sense. And I can't believe that, like, up to that point in my life, this was like a week ago. No, it was like a year ago. No, it was like 10, I don't know. It was a while ago. But way too recent for me to feel comfortable admitting that I had never heard somebody explicitly say that even if something is true, if it comes out of the mouth of someone that you don't trust, you're maybe not going to take it at a value that is good for improving your life or changing your life or sending you in a little bit of a different direction in terms of just how you think about things. So I bring this up in relation to doing this little ELIXIR podcast and my aim with it. And something that I had been thinking about while I was writing the original ideas for this was, how do I go about making people that are listening and watching trust what I say? The answer I came up with was to make, really more than half of the content of this first season is about introspection and taking a really hard look at yourself, not for the floodgates to just open and me just say, this is the law. This is the way to do things. This is how I do my tricep pushdowns. So this is the official start of the second half of season 1 of LuxFit ELIXIR. And I totally understand and accept that the first 4 episodes, and maybe a couple more after this, are a little bit of a bumpy ride as listeners and viewers. And it could be for multiple reasons. It would be particularly sad if the reason it you watched maybe an episode or 2 or 3 and it didn't really jive with you was because you were exactly the person that I was targeting. So that's the major reason that anytime I've been talking about movement so far, and more specifically like my actual work, is because I wanted to build a little bit more of a circle of trust before taking the design of the human body and why we might have pain or lack of athletic skill. But there is a second reason that I've been kind of holding off on sharing some of the like introductory pieces of the system that I've come to use. As I've alluded to, but will continue to poke and prod at for as long as there's a camera filming me, social media and extensive studies and research have teamed up to create this really difficult to navigate internet world. It's basically is just the world now. And most of the things that you come across boil down to something like, hey, our product has 10,000 reviews on Amazon, so what are you waiting for? And then it'll cut to people filming themselves on their iPhone, like in their living room. They're like, oh my goodness, this product is the best product I've ever used, bar none. And then and then they stop filming. Now, let's get a behind the scenes of that filming. It's them checking their bank account online to make sure that that company sent them their money. Yep. Oh, confirmed. Okay, I'll do another ad since they already paid me to endorse this. Another classic example would be something like someone has a podcast or whatever, and they'll say, oh, we have 5 billion studies showing that collagen is the answer to long-term joint health. Oh, by the way, did I mention that I make the greatest tasting, most bioavailable collagen that ever existed in the history of humans? What are the odds? It's not to say that any of these products are peddling snake oil or some other form of crap that doesn't have any effect on anybody in a positive way. Maybe most of it is good, but it can really easily create this air of distrust when you look at it through the lens of, oh, well, people were paid to say that about this product. Or, oh, you spent a ton of investment money to make a product and you happen to also have all these studies that support it. Now, of course, I'm looking at it in a little bit of a pessimistic way, more of like, or a skeptical way. Sure, like maybe the phone filming reviews of the product is like people genuinely were like, yeah, I already use this and it's nice to get the money to be endorsing it. That's great too. Or maybe those studies already existed and that person really did tons of research before they made their collagen product that is now on the market. But it's all about that trust. My main point is that there is a lot of that worry and skepticism because people have probably been ripped off enough times. And it'd be like, if I now said, by the way, if you go to our website and use code SAVAGE50, you'll get 50% off your first year of membership at LuxFit SF. To be clear, that does not exist. But if you're a complete stranger and you know nothing about our gym, then you're either going to do a ton of research or maybe go onto Google and say, are reviews on LuxFit legit? But people that have already been working with me, if they see this, they're going to just immediately go to like purchase it and be like, oh yeah, let's try that code, Savage50. And that's because they trust me. It just sucks that there doesn't seem to be this clear, compromised balance where you can have a presence on the internet without coming off as some scumbag that's just trying to sell something. And the very last thing I'll say about this trust concept is that I just want to bring it back to saying, in terms of me, I hope that you are still listening and watching and maybe building some trust with me and seeing that everything I'm saying really is coming from a place of thinking about it like I want to help myself be better at all these things that I've always been thinking about. And this podcast is really helping me take a lot of things more seriously that I had previously been like, oh yeah, I should probably do that better. And then I actually never make the effort to. But it really started to hit me that if I'm not making those actual efforts to improve myself a little bit, then I can't in good conscience keep trying to suggest lifestyle changes, whether that's diet, exercise, spiritual well-being, emotional health, relationship. Oh, my relationship's in shambles. My life is the hardest. The relativity of trauma that we experience from something like a failed relationship can really affect everything else. Now, we have all these influencers on the internet that are either science experts or science disciples or are doing tons of sponsored ads to sell their product or their training or their program or whatever.
Try my 8-week program.
And that has kind of come to be the foreground of health and wellness on the internet. And what I think there's too high of a concentration of is these experts and other fitness professionals just fighting with each other all the time and basically just targeting other people who are advanced in the field. Meanwhile, we have all these people that are like,
oh, hey, I would like to join a gym sometime and start exercising.
And then we're all just fighting over here. It's like, no, this is so much fucking better. Don't even see the people over here who are trying to like go from 0 to 1 in like human movement, basically. So let me touch back on studies really quickly. I know I keep bringing it up, but I think it bears necessity to keep using examples in helping to maybe like dispel a little bit of this focus on seeing some sort of data set and saying, yep, this is it. Now, when you think of like measurable data, you usually think of like chemistry labs or bio labs. So let's say you walk into a microbiology lab and there were like petri dishes with Bacillo, Oreo, Staphylococcus new proprietary bacteria sitting in the dish growing. And you'll say, well, okay, in case A, everything was stored at 40 degrees. In case B, everything was stored at 41 degrees. And that's in Fahrenheit, okay? And you pull out and you do all this data, and it's like, well, on average, if it was stored in 40 degrees, there were 13 more Staphylococcus aureus. And then you draw whatever inference you want from that. In that lab, think about the questions that you should be asking about the validity of this data, in that there are more bacteria on this petri dish in this temperature. Man, I don't know. Is it a college lab? There are so many things that can contaminate that dish, or that when you rub that agar, you could contaminate with all kinds of things. Your little pipette might be contaminated with something, and that could significantly sway the data. That concept of contamination can spread out to apply to a lot of different things. And it'd be like, if you show me a bunch of studies that say that like doing excessive overhead movements will make your collarbone disintegrate, I will shy away from that. I'm not going, even if you show me 100 studies saying that, I will still say, I don't know if that's enough proof for me to stop going overhead ever again. Now, again, not real studies here, but this does finally get a little less hyperbolic and more like a real life made up example. I think about this a lot when I was looking through a lot more studies. When they collect a sample size of usually athletes to do some sort of testing on like, does this program cause more muscle growth than this one, than the control, than et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They usually want to get a sample size of like-sized athletes and like similar development, right? It's because your data won't be great if half of your athletes are NFL players and the other half are people who did computer science and never actually threw a ball in their life, right? You're not going to get the same squat data out of both of them. But here's what's really interesting about that concept is if you want to test like development of glutes and hamstrings from back squatting, and you happen to select 400 athletes from various like colleges in the area, and you happen to say like, well, yeah, let's do them all in this position because these are the undersized players. It'll be the one that'll give us the most growth, right? We'll see the most build. So let's choose all these defensive backs who are a little bit smaller on the field. And here's the thing. Defensive backs positionally might be super quad dominant, and that might be very consistent across the board. Like maybe 75% of all those athletes are already super quad dominant. What does that mean? That basically means that if you have any sort of explosive leg movement that you want to do, and I'm being kind of crude here, but it just means that your quads dominate the movement and you don't have great hamstring or glute activation. That's generally what that means. So this becomes relevant because we're now testing a bunch of athletes who are really well developed, but they're really imbalanced and they don't have great glute or hamstring activation as they come in. And you're going to have them come in and you're going to have them do a squat cycle and the weights are going to get pretty heavy. Those bodies are going to continue to be quad dominant. And they're going to have their before and afters of like muscle activation in their posterior chain. And then the study might finish and say, well, this is conclusive. Back squatting does not actually contribute. It's a bummer. I hate it. It's like, it kind of makes me sad. Maybe I need to take a break and come back later. I just wonder how many studies are out there that people are praying to like it's the good book, where all of the test subjects were not well suited for the test, even though it appeared that they might be. If the amount of digging that you're doing on social media or just like searching around on the internet is pretty surface level, you're going to see a lot of people just fighting about all these studies and the science and your thing sucks, my thing's amazing. If you do a lot of digging past that, the stuff that's like really getting all of this traction, what you see is people who are displaying really interesting human movement, doing all kinds of crazy back bends and weightlifting and this and that and the other, and they're not spending very much time talking about all the studies that they've seen to create this program. This is where the art of the human body comes into play. We as humans have a pretty gnarly negativity bias, and I know I'm afflicted with this as well. So instead of saying, ooh, look at that bodybuilder, the striation is amazing, we'll say something like, yeah, I mean, they look ripped, but are they actually strong? Or, ooh, look at that big man throwing the piano 10 stories into that building behind his head. Instead, we just say, oh, that guy's gonna break his back. Yeah, do that when you're in your 60s, buddy. Whoa, can we take a moment to appreciate the calf definition on that person that just left boot camp? Wow. Instead, we say something like, well, yeah, they're just doing a bunch of lame cardio all day. Can they even do pull-ups and thrusters as fast as I can? It's absurd. And this negativity bias kind of spirals and spirals and spirals, and you end up usually having a network of some close friends, or maybe your network is your social media. And this is a very important distinction here that I'll get to, in that I don't see the value in publicly shaming or criticizing something that, even if you're an expert in the field, even if you're so passionate that you're seeing something that's wrong, you should take a step back and ask, is starting a huge fight with another influencer with 1 million followers going to help the people that don't move their bodies at all come onto social media and be like, wow, this looks like a welcoming environment, I should do this? So that's the public shaming and criticism spiral of negativity that I think is really hard to come out of, because if I'm somebody with 1 million followers on Instagram, that means I'm going to get a lot of backup, right? Every time I make these posts, it's going to be a ton of comments with like 3 fire emojis, and then the next one says, yes, king, and then the next one says, oh, get him, times the hundreds of thousands of comments. I'm going to go home at night and be like, whew, I'm the man. I told that guy off. The other negativity spiral, which I think is still dangerous, but it's one where you can sort of come up for air, is having a network of close friends that you confide in, I guess. Maybe you have like a thread on Messenger with them where you'll just be like, oh, did you see this person doing their power cleans today? It looked terrible. Now, I can say with a lot of conviction that I don't do any public shaming or criticism. Do I do the other thing though? Oh, yeah. Like probably actually a lot more than I want to admit. And I can just cut this out. Nah, you know what? I'm going to admit it right now that I have like an embarrassingly high amount of shit talking that I do in private with close friends. I've actively worked on reducing that, and that's what's sad is that it's still pretty gnarly. I think that there is a place where it's okay, and just in that you have a group of people that you trust and you might be criticizing something in private, you just need to make sure that you have enough time to come up for air, look at it from a different perspective, and like double, triple, quadruple check that you're like, oh yeah, even from here after a day's gone by, I still think that's really ridiculous. Or, wow, yeah, that was really not the right thing to do. Well, I'm looking at it from this way now, a week later. Yeah, I still don't agree with this notion. That's just an important part of learning like what works for you and what doesn't. So I say this, man, my heart's kind of pounding because I probably am going to put this in the episode. I say this because this is a thing that's like, I suck at this. And I hope that if you're somebody who also does this, who talks a lot of shit behind other people's backs, that you at the very least are able to come up for air and reevaluate the things that you say to the people that you trust and make sure that you're not just getting caught up in the negativity spiral. We've all heard the classics like people change, give people another chance. And I very much respect those things when I see a very clear effort to make that change. And as has become pretty abundantly clear up to this point, I'm not a fan of this idea of like playing pretend or faking it till you make it, because I think it creates a smokescreen. You create your own self-inflicted smokescreen against saying like, oh, this is something that I really need to work on. So why am I bringing this all up? It really just, again, comes back to how easy on the internet and with everything we have that's just constantly just this shit show of people fighting and bickering about like, well, if you do 5x5, it's better volume than a 4x6 because you do one extra rep and the progressive overload is improved. And again, keep in mind, remember the person who's over here like, oh, hi, I would like to join a gym someday. And you're just like, fuck off. I'm trying to fight about how to bench 600 instead of 580. Fuck. Come to the gym next year. Wait till January. Quit after a month. Get a load of this fucking idiot. I truly think that most humans on this earth are really, like, they want to be kind human beings. And I also think that the internet has started to create exactly that kind of exchange where it's just like you're so enraged by something. And what we have, instead of helping the person who's trying to like start moving or joining a gym for maybe the first time in their life, we're playing this dangerous game of pretend mixed with focusing on the wrong goals. As in the case of me and like my peers, as health practitioners, we're trying to help as many people as possible go from sedentary and or injured and turning that into, I now work out as a lifestyle. I hate saying lifestyle. That's what it is, though. That's all I'm going to say right now about playing pretend. One of the episodes coming up here, we'll talk about that in more detail. But let's talk about the other thing I just said, the dangerous game. We're focusing on the wrong goals to help these people who want to get into the gym for the first time. And this is where I can kind of cutely circle back into what I was saying earlier about trusting what somebody says. The so-called display windows of fitness on the internet, it's like your window shop. Is that what it's called? Window shopping? You want to enter the store of fitness and you're somebody who's never been like, oh, I kind of want to start shopping in the fitness store. And you open it up and then it's just what I was talking about. It's just fighting, screaming, a bunch of numbers and p-values about like the growth of sarcomeres. And you're like, okay, never mind. I'll shop at a different store or maybe never come back. That's too much of what everybody is seeing when they open up the internet and look at fitness, if they're not in the fitness space already. If you already are, you tend to latch onto something in a defensive stance because whatever you like to do, there's somebody out there who says, that is really stupid. What a dumbass program to do. And so what's natural is for you to say like, well, I need to now gather the data. I need to prove that what I do is good. But I also want to add an addendum that this is not just on the internet where we're struggling to find reliable information or stop being so negative. It is also translated into gyms. It's like a plague in gyms and people who coach in gyms everywhere. I stopped keeping track of how many times I would be asked for advice from somebody who was like a member in a gym that I was teaching at, or like maybe even a person I was training privately. They would say, "Oh, this is hurting me," or when I do this movement, it's really wobbly and unstable, whatever. And I say, "Okay, you should do ABC and do it 3 times a week or whatever it is. Do it daily, whatever the prescription is." And they say, "Yeah, okay, great, I'll do that." And then 2 weeks will go by or whatever, and I'll say, "Oh, hey, have you had a chance to do those exercises?"
No, I didn't get around to them.
It's like, so even though biomechanics is like the thing I can talk about with the most confidence, I still can't get people to trust what I'm saying to the point of them immediately implementing it. And maybe it's partially on me, maybe it's not. So here's another classic one. It's me. I'm just walking through my gym. A bunch of my people that are members are warming up for class, and there's a member there. They're there for the 100th class, and what I've noticed is that for every single class, they're doing PVC pass-throughs, and just it's like they can do it. They could put their hands this narrow and still do a straight arm pass-through. Like their shoulder mobility is off the charts, insane. And then every time that I program Olympic weightlifting, they go to do snatches and they go, whoa, and it's wobbly and shitty and it falls apart. And then I eventually, on this 100th day of watching them, continue to just do shoulder mobility that they don't need and then wonder why they can't hold a bar overhead with stability. And I'll say, oh, hey, you're really unstable in your shoulders and there's no need to keep doing those PVC pass-throughs. Instead, try this, this, and this for shoulder stability during your warm-ups. And then they proceed to not do it. As unfortunate as it is, this has actually happened where either myself giving advice or an adjacent coach or trainer that I witnessed give advice to somebody, it was just completely ignored. And then a pretty long period of time goes by. And then, like we'll say in the case of this, that person then goes to do a snatch and tears their rotator cuff because they have no stability in their shoulder. And what were they doing that entire time? Every warm-up. My PVC pass-throughs, it's my routine, gotta do it. And now they're in a sling, got surgery, and they're like, oh, how did this stroke of bad luck hit me? Like they can't even fathom that, like, oh, maybe a professional in the field told me to do something differently. Like they're just, and that's understandable. It's like you're so focused on like the fact that your shoulder is torn, but it comes back to, it's like, oh, you didn't trust that person enough to even just change up the warm-up to your workouts a little bit. So this is the kind of thing where there's a science to biomechanical principles and some movements where you can't do a heavy overhead movement with a barbell when the ball and socket joint in your shoulder is just doing this every time you go overhead. You need that to like snap into position and it's solid, right? There's a point where the art has to end. There's a point for most people in their like fitness journey where the art of the human body starts to have diminishing returns. And you can no longer just say, "Oh wow, you look great." And that's it. Just keep doing anything you want for the rest of time and never worry. If you're a bodybuilder, I mean, physique-wise, you probably look about as good as anyone on earth. But that art form of being like jacked and shredded can also lead to you getting tons of joint pain. And that's not to say that everyone is like that, but that's where the art starts to end, right? If you get to 40 years old and you're like, man, I'm starting to develop some extreme arthritis in my elbows, then it's time to start applying a little bit more science, like exploration of science into your own body so that the concepts help you return to the pain-free levels you had before bodybuilding while still being in great shape. If you take the example I made of all you're doing is shoulder mobility and then you tore your rotator cuff, like that means that art form should have ended when your coach told you to stop doing those. There's a supplement of, here are some pieces of science that will help keep you healthy so you don't have a rotator cuff blowout. If your whole thing is like high intensity boot camp and you're loving it, having a blast, your mental health has skyrocketed, but you have horrible shin splints, you've hit the point where you can no longer rely on the art form of human bodies. You've got to start applying some of the science to it. And now here we go, last phase of today's episode. A big reason why I'm bringing up trust a lot and also concurrently just ripping on research and extensive studies is that I'm about to talk about things in terms of like what seems like, oh yeah, well, this is the law of how the human body should work. One of the main points I've made through all these episodes so far, all this content, is that you should probably take what is said or read with a grain of salt, because you can find people arguing about virtually everything in existence. There's a video trending right now, and it's just somebody in their room, like on a TikTok or something, and they're saying like, someone just show me one thing that nobody's arguing about right now. And it's pretty true. But, I'm saying this, I said this recently to someone I'm really close to, and her reaction to it was like, it was kind of like a, huh? What are you even saying? And it wasn't like I showed her 2 hours worth of podcast information before it. So I don't know if this is going to go over well, but I'm really taking a shot in the dark. Like, this is me with my sniper rifle, and I'm just, and my target is 600 yards that way. I don't know if that's far. People do fight about almost everything, but what I don't see people fighting about anywhere are the basic laws of physics or arithmetic. Now, like, physicists and mathematicians do argue about really high level physics, thought experiments, and math proofs, but I'm talking about 2 plus 2 always equals 4. And if I make a little seesaw here, like when I apply a force greater than whatever weight is on that end lifts up, right? Like, this is who on the internet is arguing about that? I'm just adding a quick voiceover here because I'm editing this now and realizing that I missed a pretty important bullet point to finish this before like moving on to the next part. In that, the reason I'm bringing up arithmetic and physics as like things that people are never arguing about because they're sort of agreed upon by everyone is that the biomechanical principles that I'm about to go over kind of fall in the same category as far as I'm concerned. I just like when we're speaking strictly about like the levers and the anchor points in the human body, there's not much to argue about in terms of what I'm about to say. Okay, bye. So now let's finally get to the 4 things I talked about. First one, ankle range of motion. This, I might say, is, it's maybe not the most important or most common issue. It's close though. It's so important. The ankle range, I can't, this is a small view. I'm just gonna, fuck it. I'm putting my foot up on this table and I'm pushing my ankle through full range of motion. A lot of people can do some version of this and they'll say like, yeah, I have no pain here. It feels fine. I can do this. I can flex my knee fully. It's a question of, can you do this range of motion with like the proper hinging action of all the bones in the foot and ankle? And that's, I guess, the main thing there would be like, if you're looking from a straight on view, what a lot of people do is they'll go forward and collapse their arch inward. And be like, yeah, look at all this range of motion I have. It's like, yeah, that doesn't really apply to. Okay, I found this leg on the side of the road. We're looking at this concept of like, if the ankle is flexing forward fully, and we're assuming that the arch is supported on the inside of the foot, what this creates with the knee being able to go forward is a hip position that sits on top of the ankle better. Versus if you do what you were always told in the 90s, which was never put your knees over your toes, it immediately puts you in a squat position like this. And now, naturally too, like the femur is going to start to go up. If you want to keep that femur low as your knees go back, the only way, and this is your torso now, this position in free space doesn't work. You'll always fall back on your ass, right? So what's the compensation we do is we fold our chest to our thighs like closing a suitcase, and then that's your squat position. And then you stand up straight, and that's great. And then you come back down and you fold like a suitcase. And what this ends up doing, again, starting really from lack of ankle movement, maybe you were told that your ankles aren't supposed to flex like that. Regardless, you might now be missing that. And so now running from bottom to top, you lose your ankle range of motion. You only squat this kind of ankle range. Now your knee never gets to work past this to develop knee strength at full range. And I mean, this can be all kinds of different problems that can arise. But if you're always folding a suitcase like this, there's a good chance that you're going to be putting your hips and your low back under a lot of stress. So if this is you, what can you do? I just want to kind of, for all these sections today, offer something that you can try if you're suspicious of it. That, again, it's pretty simple. It's not like an all-inclusive screening tool today to use. But if you can't do a squat, again, you're not going to be able to see me very well here, but if you can't squat down so that your hamstrings should be touching your calves, your heels should be on the ground, and your arches should be supported in your feet. You're trying to sit in this position comfortably, and if you can't comfortably sit down there, then that's a good indication that, like, if you feel like you're going to fall backwards, that's a pretty good indication that your ankles do have some stuff to work on. Now, anterior pelvic tilt, this is the one that I think of the four is probably like the most pain-causing issue. And generally, I think it's a part of this issue. I'm going to go into this more detail at another time, but if you're now looking at the spine from a side view, like this is the head and this is the rib cage and then this is the low back, it has this kind of S curvature to it, right? And I think because most of us are aware of how this works, we see this low back arch and we think, oh yeah, there's already an arch, so it's totally fine for me to be like, I'm arched and my butt looks bigger now from doing this. Excellent. And maybe you don't have pain yet from doing your anterior pelvic tilt, but there are a few things to screen for. Are your hip flexors really tight and really weak? And that is to say, tight as in they can't stretch through like a deep split squat position, and they also can't pull much resistance up into full hip flexion, right? If I'm lying on my back or I have a weight attached to my foot and I'm pulling it up, if you have both those issues, weak and tight, you might have pretty bad anterior pelvic tilt. If you have poor glute function, you probably have anterior pelvic tilt. If you have a distended stomach, even though you're lean, you probably have anterior pelvic tilt. Those are like some of the really common things to screen for if that's something that you're dealing with. And that's to say if you don't have pain. Like if you have clear like low back sacrum pain, and it's not from some direct traumatic injury, you probably have anterior pelvic tilt problems too there. Okay, number 3, winged shoulder blades, winged scaps. Super common problem. I'm not going to take my shirt off because that's weird. But the idea here is that this border on the kind of inside and underside of the shoulder blade, if someone has it really badly, they'll just be standing and you can just see it. If their arms are at their sides standing or even sitting, you'll see like this like cavern under the shoulder blade. And that's basically what's happening there is the shoulder blade it's winging off of the rib cage. Instead of all this musculature that's supposed to be around the shoulder blade balanced, holding it flat and flush so that it can protract. I'll do it this way. So that it can protract, retract, elevate, depress, upward rotate, downward rotate, all kinds of movement that it's supposed to be able to do. If you have a winging shoulder blade, which most of us do, a lot of it does come from maybe too much pressing in your weightlifting or just bad posture. It very easily can lead to shoulder impingements and like elbow and wrist pain. But here's what I'll say in terms of like winging shoulder blades, usually just means that you have poor shoulder range of motion. And that's to say, if you go to press overhead and you can't get good overhead range of motion, instead of having it here come out over the top, you press and you're like here and you're like, oh, it's kind of stuck here. What happens a lot of times in high intensity weightlifting situations, or even just max effort, is because I can't get the bar overhead, but I know I'm supposed to, I end up arching like this. And now it's like, oh, look, it's on top. I did it. But what have I really done? I've gone from this kind of stuck shoulder position where my spine is okay to, well, I got it and now I'm arching. And again, a lot of people can probably get away with that for a while, but that over and over of spine neutral to I'm going to go overhead and arch, go overhead and arch. Ugh. If you can't fix that just by being cued, you might have winging shoulder blades to some degree. There are like multiple stages of it. And the fourth one, like I call this one important just because we are all very dexterous with our fingers and hands. Can you tell what I'm doing here? I'm playing piano, of course. What we end up with is a lot of musculature in here that gets really messed up. And the thing with these two forearm bones is that the radius on the thumb side, that bone actually like it rolls around when you move your wrist through different ranges of motion. And if you don't spend enough time just exploring like full wrist movement, all kinds of things, weight bearing on your wrists and hands, then you start to lose that natural rolling capacity in that twisting, rotating behavior. And it seems like it's not that big of a deal. But once you start kind of digging in, you'll find a lot of people that are like, oh, damn, I can't do that. Ooh, that really, putting my hand up against the wall. Oh my God, the stretch is so intense. It's not supposed to be intense, right? You're supposed to be able to put that hand up there and be like, ah, nice stretch at the most. So for winging scaps and for like terrible wrist movement, rotation of the forearms and whatnot, the main thing that you want to be looking into if you're suspicious that you have that problem is a lot of basically what I already demonstrated. Is just you want to just start practicing running through really slow controlled range of motion of your shoulder blades. And again, this is where the art of the body sort of starts to interplay with this, in that if I'm moving my shoulders through range and have no pain, it doesn't really matter what I'm doing if there's no pain. You are improving your mind-muscle connection to your shoulder blades. And same goes for the wrist. You spend a lot of time in different positions that is something other than typing on a keyboard, then you start developing a better mind-muscle connection. Therefore, you start getting better blood flow. You start improving the tone, strengthening or restoring the neurology that comes from your spine down through your arm, and maybe reducing pain that's there that you just kind of live with right now. Neck, shoulder, and wrist pain is just so common that I do think there are a lot of people that just have it and they're just like, yeah, this is just how it is. Some days it's worse, some days it's better. I just kind of take it as it comes. So in summation, there are two things that really can't be overstated enough. One is that like the beauty and the resilience of our bodies is insane. And I think instead of criticizing people for doing something that they're enjoying, we should just really start moving into the realm of just admiring that. If nothing else, even if you completely hate it, it's like, yeah, but this is a person that out of the vast majority of people on earth is really dedicated to doing something. But the presence of pain in our bodies cannot be overstated enough either. It's not supposed to be there. I don't care if someone's supposed to wait till they're your age. You can get rid of that pain unless your leg's broken in half. You probably got to get surgery. If your back is tight all the time, ask somebody that you trust for advice and actually do what they recommend. If your hip joints or shoulder joints are constantly cracking and popping, ask somebody for advice. I wish I could yell this. It's just like the microphone might clip. It doesn't really come across well on camera. Pretend that for the stuff I'm saying right now, I'm screaming at you, because it's kind of like I'm kind of annoyed, honestly, at how much, yeah, my back's kind of tight, but I'll figure it out. I'll push through it. Yeah, I mean, I have this crazy crack in my shoulder all the time, and yeah, it's kind of sharp and pinchy. It's fine. It's not fine. It's not fine. Bye. Have a lovely week.